Obviously, there are two different diplomatic initiatives underway. The African Union's got a roadmap for a ceasefire and dialogue, and then NATO members have a contact group meeting in Qatar currently underway, also speaking to the opposition in Libya for a possible post-Gaddafi dispensation. Which one do you think is the best approach?
Lerato, there is no one single process to it. The Libyan conflict is very complex, and so all approaches, they'll all help to complement each other. Indeed, there's no one actor, no one strategy.
I mean, the African Union is talking ceasefire, political reforms and dialogue. They're really not saying exit strategy for Mr. Gaddafi. They're falling short of actually making that kind of conclusive arrangement for the Libyan situation. Is the African Union compromised?
This is not new. We have seen it before. The African Union, through its regional economic arrangements, has failed to come up with effective exit strategies in situations where such stalemates have existed. Look at the Zimbabwean situation, the Ivory Coast, the Madagascar. There are many areas where the African Union has failed to come up with.
But going back to the Libyan situation, particularly and specifically, are they compromised? Because we know that Libya, through the auspices of Colonel Gaddafi, has been one of the top 5 financiers of the African Union.
Well, yes, in one way they are compromised because Libya has been funding the African Union, but at the same time, this mirrors a weakness on the part of the African Union. Because if they are not able to package exit strategies for such circumstances because of funding purposes, then we miss the point of policing the continent.
Beyond policy, let's talk about the practicalities. The formation of the African Union after the Organization of African Union was largely a decision that was given momentum by Colonel Gaddafi at an AU summit or an OAU summit in Sirte, Libya. The building blocks and the financing thereof came from Libya. Other Pan-African organizations, such as the African Development Bank, have within the 77 shareholder base of that institution, Libya making up one of the top 8 financial contributors. This economic muscle that Libya has within the Pan-African solidarity infrastructure, does it create an interesting and a complex dynamic for the diplomatic initiative?
Well, looked at an individual level, yes, we might make such an analysis, but Libya is not Gaddafi, and therefore the African Union should not protect Gaddafi because the funding that has been happening is not a personal funding, but it's a Libyan funding process, which we believe a new government, if it has genuine interest for the African cause, will continue the funding process.
Let's talk about a new government, if indeed that is what the Libyan people decide. One of the hallmarks of Colonel Gaddafi's foreign affairs and international relations has been trying to bridge the gap between Arab North Africa and African or black sub-Saharan Africa. He has championed the idea of a United States for Africa with a common currency, and even prior to the African Union, he was very supportive of sub-Saharan African liberation movements. Many of them have received military training and political support from the Libyan state under Colonel Gaddafi. That role he's played in trying to bridge the gap between the Maghreb and Africa, is it something that can be followed through if he's not there?
Yes, this has been there in the books during the time of the Casablanca and the Monrovia conflict. When the OAU was formed, there were these challenges and there were these dreams of a united Africa and a peaceful Africa. And one issue that is important in all this process is from a conflict resolution perspective, it's important that we should be able to distinguish between genuine grievances, genuine causes, and predatory actions. particularly if Maummar Gaddafi has been doing this for a germane cause for African development, then we should not see him positioning himself for a greater muscle to control the continent. So we have, predatory intentions, and we have genuine intentions for building Africa.
So basically you're saying Maummar Gaddafi's attempts at African Union had less to do with African Union and solidarity. It had more to do with his ambitions to be a president of a pan-African institution. We cannot rule that out. Looking at the flashes that emerged that he has been in consultation with the traditional leadership of the various countries of the continent, to expand his muscle and power over the whole continent. Let's talk about the AU going forward. The major financiers are South Africa, Libya, Nigeria and Egypt. Obviously, demographically and by value of the economy, it makes sense. But what are the alternative sources of funding for this Pan-African body?
Well, the African continent does not exist in isolation. And presently, as we speak, these are not the only actors who have been funding the African Union. For instance, there is a program that is ongoing right now, of which I've been a part of, that military and security program. Yeah. The British are funding the South African military in view of expanding not only the South African military, but the African executive military personnel who are undergoing some training here at the South African National War College, funded partly by the British government. So this indicates that these are not the only sources of funding for the African Union.
But I mean, obviously, for the African Union to have greater clout, we need to have all hands on deck, I suppose. Everybody contributing, no countries not paying their fees, countries in arrears, that sort of thing, and then everybody cooperating on peace and security issues. We know that contributions to the Peace Fund now have to be increased from 6% to 12%, but again, the usual suspects are the ones making the contributions financially and even by way of personnel. When are we going to get everybody coming on board?
Lerato, we live in a continent, of a paradox of success and failures. We have this genuine vision for a united and successful Africa. At the same time, we have this crop of leadership that has a different approach to it in terms of advancing and moving communities towards just peace. And indeed, it takes all stakeholders to come together and we have concerted efforts towards a united Africa.